In this episode of Around the World Art History Edition, we'll be focusing on the distortion of human figure. For centuries, all over the world, artists have been taking advantage of their artistic liberty when it comes to human form. Sometimes influenced by society's idea of perfection, and sometimes led by their own desires, their art reflects very personal decisions of idealist proportions, whether it be stylistic or veristic. Because it would be impossible to touch on an example from every culture, we'll focus on two. Our first stop is ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, the art was so uniform that it ended up being tradition for many years to follow the same pattern of disproportion, profile views, and awkward rendering of the human figure. Despite this tradition, there were periods of unconventional ideas that temporarily overpowered the long-standing grids of rigid clones. One of these periods is referred to as the Amarna period. During this time, Akhenaten was ruler of Egypt and took it upon himself to change the way society thought about religion and standards of beauty. As seen in this statue of Akhenaten from the Temple of Aton, the way Akhenaten had himself depicted was very different than the way earlier Egyptian rulers had been. His belief in Aton, a celestial deity, seemed to morph into his own idea of himself, taking on an almost unearthly, mystical type of form. His features are very feminine as well. Focusing on his torso, notice the wide hips and narrow waist, commonly associated with the hourglass figure of a female. His slightly protruding, round tummy seems to fit into our usual idea of fertility in art as well. The long, spindly arms don't have any muscle definition, nor does the stomach area. The traditional idea of a fit, toned body seems to have gone out the window. Next, let's bring our focus to his facial features. This is where some androgyny comes in. There's a contrast between the full lips and chiseled jaw, the long, swan-like neck and the knees, the almond eyes, and the headdress. It's as if his whole idea was to blend the power of fertility and sensuality with authority and strength. He really is blurring the lines of tradition and innovation. Our next stop is a little bit closer to home, Republican Rome. Unlike the Greeks, Romans believed that a veristic bust was enough to convey an entire person, and that the body of a person should remain highly idealistic. This is exemplified in the statue of a Roman general circa 75 to 50 BCE. At first glance, the sculpture seems like the average Roman sculpture. Power pose, stern expression, rigid stance. However, a close look exposes some inconsistencies. The face of the general is stern and wrinkled with hard eyes, like a man that's been through hell and back. He seems to be looking into the distance. Brown lines and gentle folds around the eyes and hairline help identify this face as highly veristic, leaving little to the imagination. Bringing our attention to the torso, we begin to notice that something is a little off. It's like someone chopped the head off of a 40-something-year-old and put it onto a 20-year-old's body. The muscle definition just doesn't match up with the worn expression of the general's face. This contrast shows how the ideals of a society can sometimes overpower any semblance of realism.